So one thing I wanted to talk about when we look at drawing fashion and drawing clothing is if you are just teaching yourself to draw like those basic shapes, and you're still kind of figuring out, okay, how do I draw something like a cardigan or a simple top? Often pattern making and like pattern websites for sewing can be good places to start. The garments, especially for like independent pattern designers, tend to be relatively simple. They're geared towards the home sewist. And so let's take a look at like these Dania shorts. So they often also have a lot more views of each of the piece of clothing because they're trying to give sewists an idea of how it might fit on their body. It is funny to me that you'll often get more views of a piece of clothing for a pattern than for an actual piece of clothing that you order. So the best thing about them, though, is that they come with these technical flats. So technical flats help us understand how each part of the garment fits together and the basic style lines. The best thing about technical flats is that they are really, really easy to deconstruct and figure out how you want to draw them on your model. So I'm going to take a super quick pause here and just draw a fashion figure, and then I will restart the video and we will look at those technical. So I actually decided that I lied. I'm going to record this part because I think that there are good things to reiterate and talk through. So what I am choosing to draw here is actually going to be based off of the pose of this model. I think that will help us understand how to begin placing fabric is by drawing from people and the clothing that they are wearing. So I'm gonna kind of slope her shoulders, and I'm gonna keep her proportions mostly. I'm gonna exaggerate them a little bit so that they fit closer to our 9 heads standard. Let's see. We have kind of that mid-bust point, and then I'm going to shorten up the torso and get in the base form of my pelvis here. Round out the hip. And then I am going to, at minimum, get in where my legs actually lie. And then the foot in that way. And here, let's see. And then our foot comes more back and take the arm back a little bit here. So this is going to appear just a bit shortened because it's going back into space, so we have some foreshortening going on. This is also a place where I would make sure to add in a couple of those curve lines, so I remind myself that the arm remains having a curve to it, despite the fact that it's traveling back in space. Then this drops right down to about mid-thigh. Okay. I do feel like I got my hip just like a tad high here. So I might come in and just scoop it out a bit. Then draw in kind of the bust, where it about hits. And I might start doing my fashion drawing with this much of a little skeleton, because so much of this is going to end up covered in clothing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to look at here and where my waist falls, because these pants are high-waisted. If our belly button is right here, they are coming up to the smallest part of our waist, rather than modernly waistlines have kind of fallen down to be more on the hip. This is considered your natural waist, and is where a lot of historic fashion comes to be the smallest at. You'll notice a lot of times high-waisted pants really flatter curvy figures because they emphasize the smallness of the waist whilst skimming over the hips. And then you can play with different styles on the top to kind of make it appear larger or smaller, to get closer to that idealized hourglass figure that tends to be what is the traditional beauty standards in fashion. And so we're going to look at the waist. The waist, the top of it comes to the natural waist, and then it's a thicker waistband, so it comes down just a bit, and we want to look proportionally. So if our total short length, we want coming down to maybe about here on the thigh. So about, a little higher than mid-thigh. We want to judge that proportion of the short against the waist. Now what we're going to also do is we're going to think about the fact that this curves. So the curve is going to come up a little bit on the edges, and you don't have to come up very far, almost just a little bit of a smile to give the curved effect. Then also we want to find where our button band goes. We'll find center and then just move a little bit off of it for that center overlap. And now we can find where the bottom of the band is. If we switch to these technical flats here, we can see even closer how this is built. So it has a flat front, and then it starts the paper bag waist, and two buttons. So the technical flats can help us very clearly see how things are constructed. And we can pull the fly down to about 2/3 of the way down. The stitching of it comes up a little bit higher than that. But where we're hitting kind of this divide is going to fall. Actually, yeah, I might have been right about 2/3 of the way down. I redrew that a little high. So I have my stitching line here now. I will probably come back in and obscure this a bit because our stitching lines don't tend to be super prominent. And then at the bottom of our inseam, so that's going to fall down to the lowest part of our pelvic bone here. And then our pants also have a curve to their hem because they are also curved around the leg. Now, one thing that can be good about looking on the model and things like that is looking at the fit. So often I like to take a model that I've drawn out to be pretty proportional to my own sizing, and redraw anything that I might want to change in a pattern. So for example, I like the paper bag waist on this pant, but there are two things. I've sewn this pant before. I like to make this kind of faux button front. There's a real button front and a faux button front option for this. I like to make this just a tad wider so that it truly sits under like my full bust point. That way it's like giving me the same width here and then start the paper bag waist. So it's a little bit narrower in the pattern. And I like to do that, and then following this curve, I'll do a squiggly line. That indicates that paper bag waist. Then I'm going to bring that line in, and I always like to give it a nice little curve to indicate that the top of this waist comes a little bit away from the body, and that the elastic comes through the center of this channel to give us a nice kind of like snatched in waistline. The other thing that I change about these shorts when I'm making it is the depth of the pocket. Not really something that you can see here, but these pockets come in about like this, and the problem with that is that if you sit down and you have a phone, it like falls out of the pocket. So I like to extend my pocket lining a little bit down. There is another pant pattern that I really like how the pockets are done, and I'm going to actually combine them both in my head. This is the starting to designing your own garments, right? Is taking a pattern that you already know how to do, maybe another pattern, smushing them together, redrawing the lines, maybe playing with proportions a bit, and that's how you begin designing your own garments. So what I like about this other pant is that the pocket is actually this separate piece that comes out even just a little further from the body, and it's not a patch pocket. It's just like this weird little construction that allows the pocket to be super deep but not add a lot of bulk to your hip. And so I'm going to sketch that in, and I still want my shorts to flare out, and this will come in just inside so that it indicates that the pocket's just a little roomier and baggier. I also sometimes like to give just a little bit of a suggestion of where, if there was something in that pocket, it would sit. And then I like to figure out the cuff and the proportion of that cuff. Figuring out the proportion of the cuff in a drawing helps me decide if I need to add some extra fabric to the hem to make the cuff bigger or smaller than the pattern calls for. Often patterns are drafted to, typically it's a size 8, and then if they are redrafted for plus sizes, it's to a size 16. I require a larger pattern than both of those sizes, and so when you are sizing up garments from, quote, standard sizing to your non-standard sizing, you want to play with some things like proportions. If I leave the same skinny folded hem here, it's going to look much smaller on my body than it would on somebody who has like smaller diameter hips and legs. So, or I guess circumference, diameter too, but. So now I have these shorts drawn in, and I want to decide on a top. I could look at other patterns if I wanted to. I like True Bias's patterns, especially when I'm working with new sewers, because they're really well written to follow along. So if you're a new sewist, they make them so easy to follow along. I'm gonna look and see if there's a top I really like. Maybe like the wrap top is gonna cover up all of my detailing at the waist. Maybe I'll just do this Bryn cardigan, but like tucked in. The thing that I would want though is I would want it to come out. Maybe I just want to look at a different pattern altogether. What is it? It's so... I'm trying to remember the name of this other place. If I think of it, I'll pull it up. Honestly, like the Ogden cami that they had, which is what's suggested for this, looks great with these pants. So maybe I'll draw that in. Let's look at the technical flats for that. Pretty simple, front and back, very similar. I just feel like I want something a little different. Maybe I'll draw in some color blocking, and that will be my fun little thing. So this is the Ogden cami. I actually, what if though I did this vest? I'll go ahead and just render in this cami for now, but I'm going to change a few things about it. I'm going to give it a button front. Alright, so I like to have my tops come and bassoon over the shorts a little bit. So it's actually going to come in and obscure part of this paper bag waist and then come back in. And then we'll have tucking lines drawn here up to the fullness of the bust line. Things tend to stretch their fullest right over the bust. And then handling the neckline, I think that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to change the neckline of this, is I am going to almost set in like a bustier style neckline. And we bring it in like that. Give like a little top, maybe some cording in here. Blend that in nicely. And then figure out how I want to do these straps. Try to make sure that they're symmetrical in their width. Maybe I'm gonna make them be like a interesting crossed strap type thing. All right. once I have the basics of my clothes figured out, oh, I definitely dropped that bust point down lower than the other one. Just try to keep everything somewhat symmetrical here. I will finish drawing in my figure. So I know I'm gonna have to raise these straps up a little bit. Blend in my neckline to my shoulders. Round out my shoulders nicely. Add in some of the curvature of my arm. Like I said, I had these nice marks in before, so now I can give myself a little mark where my elbow is and bring out the width of the forearm to about the widest point being 1/3 of the way down to the wrist, and then tapering. One thing I have here is this pocket. I need to change the angle a little bit if I still want her hand going in the pocket, because I have my pocket adjusted a little bit. Okay, good to figure that out now. Alright, get that figured out. Add in that little bit of extra width to the hand for that thumb. Don't want anyone to have to walk around thumbless just because I forgot to draw in a thumb. Erase any of this that got covered up. And now draw in my bicep. I feel like my shoulder needs to come out just a little bit more. Maybe this needs to come up. Yeah. There we go. We conveniently have most of this arm. I'm going to leave it falling behind because I want to keep the detail of the short, although I guess I have it over here, so I could, it looks more natural to have it come in front. Down to the wrist. And then build out the basic shapes for my hand. I'm going to keep them about there for now and just erase what's under them. And then the front of the knee is pointing out this way. So everything's going to reorient itself around that. My knees just... Oh yeah, I had them right to start with. So you can see that even when I'm drawing the figure, I tend to go back and forth quite a bit, trying to be like, okay, do I want the knee sitting this high? I think so. I could always go back and look at my reference image. And I would highly encourage you to be using reference images for your figures as you begin drawing. I still like to use them just because if you use them, things look more accurate. You're more likely to get a proportional figure. You just have to stretch things a little bit further if you want to get that high fashion look. Or, like I said, it's becoming more common to draw a diverse set of models because most clothing companies and brands want to attract a diverse set of buyers. And so you want to be considering all sorts of sizes in your drawings. I don't think you'll ever regret knowing how to draw more shapes and sizes of people, but you might regret not knowing how to draw. A diverse range of folks. Okay. Now I need to maybe make a decision or more about what my hands are doing here. I think I need to make them just a little bit smaller. There we go. And then kind of curve. Actually, yeah, I like that. I like it if the fingers are a little bit more spread out here. Okay. And then, let's see, let's get in a basic face. And maybe a little bit of a hairstyle. Just a bit. Okay. Maybe a brow. And this hairstyle is nice enough to me. So it might seem a little bit simple, but this is what I will probably end up bringing in as a sketch. And then I will render it out more fully. The one thing I don't like about how I have this rendered is this foot. Oh, I know why. It's not coming forward far enough. Okay. So let's... because that doesn't come back in at all. Not paying attention, draw things wrong. I would like to be like, oh, you can't draw things wrong in art. In figure drawing, you could draw things so that they don't look like people, though. Okay. something like that. We'll get everything figured out in the wash here.